pressure on Donald Trump's family. Trump in the room discussing hush money payments with Michael Cohen and the National Enquirer's publisher, David Pecker. Cohen and Pecker now cooperating with the feds, and so is this man.
Replacing George this week is my chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. And you think George is tough? Wait till you see Alan.
All right, Alan Weisselberg, Trump Organization CFO, allegedly involved in the hush money payment. The prosecutors are now saying was a crime reportedly granted immunity in return for cooperation, potentially dishing about a business that Michael Cohen's friend Donnie Deutsch called a criminal enterprise.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. I really believe even post-Trump presidency, you're going to see the Trump business empire being picked apart for the next 20 years. It's basically built as a criminal enterprise.
All right, so criminal or not, the Trump Organization is headed by a very small team. Two of them, Cohen and Weisselberg, now cooperating with federal agents. The spotlight now on the remaining players, Trump's children, Don Jr., Eric, and, of course, Ivanka.
Why work for me? Why not go someplace else?
Well, I actually did go someplace else for a year, and ultimately sort of the siren's call of working on your projects drew me back. They're the sexiest projects out there, the best projects out there, and honestly, you know, being in this field, I couldn't want to work for anyone else. The Trump Organization hopefully will be everywhere globally, and we'll continue to grow it, take what you made such a phenomenal brand and continue to extend that really and make it just a family company.
All right, so with me now are Tim O'Brien, executive editor of Bloomberg View, who recently wrote about the growing pressure on Donald Trump Jr., and back with us, Nick Ackerman, former Watergate special prosecutor. Great to have both of you guys with us. Tim, let me begin with you. You kind of look at this from where the prosecutors are standing. They're slowly squeezing one by one people that were part of the Trump Organization. Alan Weisselberg, Michael Cohen. Are they squeezing these people more and more, you think?
Well, I think that's a classic prosecutorial strategy, is you squeeze up from the bottom as you move towards the top. In Alan Weisselberg, they have someone who has been with the Trump Organization since 1974. He was Fred Trump's accountant. In David Pecker, you have someone who's had at least, I think, a 2-decade relationship with President Trump. Both of those men can speak to issues and a history that goes well beyond some of the current stuff that Bob Mueller is looking at, which raises the question, I think, as to whether or not the Southern District's investigations will go well beyond where Mueller started. And some of that may continue to be a problem for the president, you know, after he leaves office, and certainly, I think, is going to get into the operations of the Trump Organization itself.
Let me pick up on that point that Tim just brought up. You got 2 federal investigations. How much of that do you think is a bit of their design to provide redundancy to one another, to protect one another, so to speak? I mean, there's all this talk about can President Trump shut down the Bob Mueller investigation, but now this one is actually, the Southern District of New York seems to be also gaining traction.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what they did. I mean, they had this search warrant that was executed in New York, and they let the Southern District go with a big part of this case. And they did that on purpose, because if Trump tries to shut down anything in Washington, the Southern District is not going to roll over. I was there for 10 years. They don't call it the Sovereign District of New York for nothing. I mean, he's in big trouble, right. And this case is turning into a very solid case against the president.
Yeah, it seems like they certainly have a lot of momentum. But, Tim, one of the things that President Trump has been known to say is that his family was a red line. If the investigation, whether it be Mueller or anyone, came after his family, that it would be a red line. All bets are off the table. Any power he has, he could possibly exercise against that. We are at that stage now when you look at where these investigations are going into the Trump Organization, which is a family business.
I think actually that red line was crossed last year. You know, Bob Mueller executed a subpoena on the Trump Organization for financial records last summer. I think Donald Trump Jr. is clearly front and center in this investigation. It appears that he misled Congress and may have lied to Congress, which is the same thing the judge in Michael Cohen's case pointed out as one of the most egregious things he did. And I think today, you know, the president's tweeting, he sort of put this into 3 baskets today. Yeah. He said, I never directed Michael Cohen. None of it was campaign related. And Michael Cohen can't be trusted. The first two of those, there's ample evidence that he at least appears to have directed both the campaign finance problems and the payments to Stormy Daniels and McDougal, as well possibly Michael Cohen's testimony to Congress about the deal in Russia. And then on whether or not this was campaign related, there's also evidence in the record now, per the cooperation agreement with AMI, they said that the partnership was, engineered to influence and help the election. And then the third issue is to whether or not Michael Cohen has credibility. These prosecutors are veteran prosecutors. They are not only going to rely on Michael Cohen. They have email, they have financial records, they have tape recordings.
Yeah, thousands of documents.
It is. So he's sort of shooting these empty defenses up in the air right now.
Yeah, and Rudy Giuliani is trying to suggest that, in fact, Michael Cohen is telling the truth, and the president's answers to Bob Mueller should comply or at least comport with that part of the truth. What is your take? Donny Deutsch described the Trump Organization as a criminal enterprise. What is your take on the Trump Organization from what you've learned about it?
I mean, from what I've learned about it, it's just like the mafia I used to prosecute. You got the guy who's the boss on top, and you've got people who have various roles. It really is, it seems to be no different. I mean, at least, although I must say the mafia bosses I prosecuted were a lot smarter than Donald Trump, and they were better organized.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have, at least with all the documentation that they've been able to gather, that it was a smart operation.
You don't have your own people tape recording you at the same time that you're in the middle of a conspiracy to pay off women to keep them quiet during a campaign. I mean, I don't know.
But what does that tell you? That the people around him in his inner circle felt they needed to record these conversations, and we don't know who directed them to record it, but if they felt they needed to record it, what does that tell you about what they felt?
Because he's always threatened that he was recording other people.
Right.
So, of course, anyone working for him who thought at some point he might throw them under the bus is going to tape him before he tapes them.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a criminal enterprise from what we've learned in reporting?
I think what's useful, I think Donald Trump has intersected with organized crime for decades in Atlantic City and in New York. He clearly had partnerships with people who had connections to Russian organized crime. I think to say the whole thing has been a criminal enterprise is a stretch. But I don't think you need to say it's a criminal enterprise to continue to prosecute him for breaking the law.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.